Today is August the 21st, 2024. My name is Tanya Finchum. I'm with Oklahoma State University with the Oklahoma Oral History Research Program. I am in Bartlesville today to speak with Rodney Adams for our Santa Ambassadors Oral History Collection. So thank you for spending the morning with me.
Ho, ho, ho.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Before we get into your Santa, well, let me say this. You transform into Santa Claus during the holiday season, and you've been doing that for
30 years.
30 years, okay. So
Yeah.
you've got lots of stories to tell me then.
Oh, yeah.
All right, before we get to Santa, though, let's learn a little bit about you. Give us some
Yeah.
background on yourself.
Well, I'm born and raised Bartlesville boy, and actually when I was about 7, I guess it was, we moved to the country, and we went to grades, well, actually all the way through the 8th grade to an old country school called Labadee Heights. And the little area that we was from was called Pruneville. And there was a lot of Catholic Polish that worked for the smelters.
Oh.
And there was, of course, a little grocery store out there that was called Menench's Grocery. And they made Polish sausage. And he was very well known. And of course, he had the best meat market, of course, at that time in Bartlesville. Everybody that had any money did their shopping out there. And what was so neat about it was that they had ledger cards. And when you'd buy your grocery, he would put it on a charge ticket. And at the end of the month, then you were to come in and pay your account, in full. And boy, where can you find that now?
I don't think you can.
Yeah, but my my family ran mercantile stores. Originally, they came from Roanoke, Texas, and my granddad owned a livery stable, and he rented buggies and freight wagons. And then him and a good friend saw that the oil industry was booming in Oklahoma, and they went to Hominy, little town of Hominy.
I drove through that today.
And my granddad opened up a rural mercantile out in the middle of the oil field, and he sold cattle and horses to the oil industry.
Oh.
And he again, same thing. They had ledgers, and they would post everything. And then they had all the Indians that had the head rights. They would come and pay Granddad, and if they didn't, of course, he wouldn't give them any more credit.
Oh.
So, but he had a 3rd grade education, and the man could literally go through that ledger and tell you exactly how much you owed.
Did you know him?
Oh, yeah.
You knew him?
Yeah.
And what was his name?
His name was John.
John.
And he used to take me fishing when I was 3 years old, had an old Folgers coffee can and worms, and I'd hold his hand, and he had the cane pole, and there was a big pond right behind the store. And we would walk down to it, and he was a chain smoker, and he rolled his own cigarettes, and he would roll up a bunch of them, and then we would go down to the pond, and he'd sit there and smoke, and didn't really do a lot of fishing. He just said, "Ronnie, you keep an eye on a pole, And so anyway, then he'd fall asleep. Well, I'm there all by myself, and I'm digging in the dirt. I'm not paying any attention. And so, for some reason, I looked out, and the cane pole was out in the middle of the pond. And my dad come down, and he said, "You guys have got a fish, And so he swam out and got the pole, and sure enough, there was a bass that was on it. So and he oh, he spoiled me. He got me hooked on Dr. Pepper, and he had these little, I call them cherry drops. They were hard candy, and he had a bowl that he always had it filled for me. And when I'd come to their house, first thing he'd say, Ronnie, you want a piece of candy? And he'd pull the bowl out of the china cabinet, and we'd sit there, eat those cherry things up, and then have a Dr. Pepper.
And that would have been about what year?
Oh, that was 1950.
1950.
Yeah, I was born in 47, and I was 3 years old.
Okay.
And I'll never forget, he had emphysema, and I'll never forget this. He would sit at their dining room table with a galvanized pan and would cough up blood. Mm. And of course, that's what he died of. And I took that real hard. Even at my age, he was my buddy, my grandmother, though, she was, I guess you'd say, the patriarch of the family. They had 12 kids, and my mother, of course, come from 13, and but they were sharecroppers. And I don't know if you know what a sharecropper is, but that's how they made their living. And they got them a place to live on that farm, and they would grow crops and then go to the market, and when they sold like eggs and different things, that was cash money. He had split it with the owner of the land. And they'd grow watermelons, they'd corn, did all kinds of stuff, And he had a herd of milk cows that I used to have to get up when I was little with him and milk the cows. And I'll never forget, boy, the winters would get so cold. And I'd go out there, and the old cow wouldn't want to give him milk. And my fingers felt like they were just froze off, and frozen. And I'll never get this one. At one time, I put a yank on her, and boy, she hauled off and swung that tail around and hit me right in the face, knocked me off the stool. And Grandpa had a big laugh out of that. He said, son, you're going to have to learn how to do that.
Warm up your hands somehow.
Yeah.
Well, what was your grandmother's name? If his was John?
My grandmother's name was Minnie.
Minnie, okay.
And
mine was too.
Yeah, and my grandma on my mother's side was Myrtle.
Okay.
Some old name, you don't hear them, those anymore.
You don't. Were you an only child?
No, I had a brother and a sister that were younger.
Younger. You were the oldest.
Yeah.
In charge.
Yeah. Yeah, I sure was. That was a big responsibility too.
Well, how did your parents meet?
They went to grade school and high school together down there in Hominy, and went to an old country school that was called Mound Valley. And of course, my mother claimed that she didn't like him. She thought, she thought he was spoiled rotten, And but he would talk to sometimes to her brother or sisters, and ask about her. And so he come home on leave one time. He was in the Merchant Marines, and he came home, and he run into her, and they started having a few dates. And then, of course, he had to go back, and he started writing to her.
Okay.
And then, of course, it all grew, and they fell in love and got married. And I was the first, like I said, the first one out of the hatch. And we lived out on a ranch down there in Hominy. I think my first couple of years when I was little, there was a creek down there that was known to flood a lot. Dad was a cowhand then, and he would ride fence, for this old man. And so when I was born, I had colic, and I was a pretty bad case of it. And he went into town to get medicine where the creek had flooded, and he had to, of course, couldn't use the wagon. He had to take and wade the stream, with a horse, and got in, and of course got the medicine and everything. Well, then we moved from there, and there was a period of time when we were living in Delaware, and we lived in a bakery, an old bakery that was there. And Dad got a job with his brothers who had grocery stores here in Bartlesville, and they'd done very well. And Dad was, he said that, can you imagine having 3 kids and making $38 a week? He said, we managed, we did it. He didn't have a car, and he had to walk to work at the old dairy that was here in Bartlesville. And at that time it was called, I think, Cliff. And then it later became Crystal Ice. And the ice plant, of course, sold ice to the people because they had the old wooden refrigerators.
Yep, ice boxes.
It didn't have, new refrigerators to cool.
Electric, yeah.
Yeah. So they would have to chip off whatever the customer wanted. And a lot of times they would have to go upstairs to the apartments and carry a cake, of ice up. And then they had Food Locker, where they actually kept people's meat. And they would go in and pull whatever they were going to have for a meal from that locker. And they had several customers, that did that. In fact, that thing was in operation up until the early 60s. And it was still being used, and people were keeping their meat stored there. But then Crystal Ice bought the dairy, and they couldn't use the same name for the dairy as they were the ice plant. So they had a contest to rename it. And this lady came up with the name Top End Dairies. And it was that name for several years. I've got pictures of my dad hanging out the side of his old truck, and it had a 3-digit phone number on it. And of course, there it was, we lived out in the country. Well, we had a party line, and Mom hated it.
You knew everybody's business.
She'd get on the phone, and then everybody in the neighborhood she'd hear the click, and they'd all be listening in on her private business. She didn't like it.
You have to get some codes.
Yeah. Everybody knew our business, She didn't like it very much.
So your dad was a milkman.
Yeah, he was a milkman for 34, 35 years, something like that. Yeah. Yeah, we later moved into an apartment about a block away from the dairy, and Dad would walk to work. Well, then, of course, he'd get in his truck and he'd make his deliveries. and he would come by the apartment, and they were still using ice, then. And so when Dad would finish with lunch, he would go back out to get in the truck to go ahead and finish his, route. And there'd be a row of kids behind the truck wanting Dad to give him a chunk of ice. And he would chip off big old chunks of ice for them, And so we were the popular kids in the neighborhood. But my brother and I, we went through a period of being Hopalong Cassidy and had the outfits and everything. And of course, I had a bicycle that run off of a fan belt, and somebody stole it. So they wouldn't take our fire truck, but we'd go to pushing. It had a hill that we had to go from down to Frank Phillips Boulevard, which was the main road that come through, because that was 60. And we would push and get to racing, and I'd jump on or my brother would. And by the time we'd hit the corner, we was on two wheels, And I'll never forget when they were widening Frank Phillips Boulevard, it was dirt. And they later, of course, I'm pretty sure it was then asphalted, then. But downtown had old brick streets.
You remember that, huh?
And we, of course, had a brick maker place here in Bartlesville. And there's a lot of the old bricks that are still around. It says Bartlesville IT, which meant Indian Territory.
Okay.
And trying to think what else was kind of interesting about. Forgot that I have to tell you this tale. Dad would come by, and he'd be making his route. Well, right around the corner from us was an old grocery store, and he would come in and deliver, milk there. And we got to noticing, he'd park, on the street, and he would go in and make his deliveries. Well, one day we weren't supposed to, and we were told not to go any further than that corner. But we decided to go and pay our respects to Dad. Well, we walked into the store, and as soon as we got in there, we saw them big jars of candy, hard candy. And of course, little boys, that big around. And the grocery store owner said, "Jack, your boys are out here." "What?" I said, "Yeah, your boys are out here." "Oh boy, are they going to get in trouble." Well, he come out and he saw us eyeing the candy jars, and he bought us a sack of candy. And he said, "Now boys, you go down there to that corner and you eat all that candy. Don't you take any of it to the house, because you know what'll happen if your mom finds out that you went to the store." So we got this bright idea that we could collect money ourselves, and we thought money was washers and what else was it? Buttons, the big old buttons. So we got to saving them. Well, our pockets were bulging pretty good, and we got the bright idea that we was going down there by ourselves and not, catch Dad, to go down there and see the store owner. And we walked in there, and of course we were eyeing the candy jars, and said, "What do you boys want?" "Well, we're here to buy some candy." And so he said, well, pick out whatever it is you want to buy. And oh man, sack kept getting bigger and bigger. And he said, now that's going to be so much money. So we went to pulling the buttons and the washers out and laid them up on the counter because we had no idea what the value, of coins were. And laid them up on the counter. And he looked at us, really kind of funny. And he said, okay, you get out of here. So we went down there to that corner, made sure that we got all of it eaten. And he came by finally then later in the afternoon to make the store deliveries. And he said, Jack, said, your boys were in here today. Well, what the heck did they want? What was they in here for? He said, well, you owe me 17 cents. He said, well, what did they buy? Candy. So he came home, and boy was mad. And he come in and he said, guess where your boys were at today? They was at the grocery store buying candy. It said they cost me 17 cents today. Boy, Mom took us into the bedroom and let us have it. But it was pretty funny, to think that we thought the value was washers and buttons instead of real coins. And we didn't do that again.
Now you learned your lesson.
Yeah, right. We had a lot of fun things like that. When they was redoing Springfield Boulevard, a lot of the dirt was clay, and they had these old oil lanterns, that they would set out coal oil, and as a warning, to that people, that it's road work. And so me and my brother got some of that clay, and we got to where we'd roll it and make a marble out of it. And we had like a little stick, like a toothpick or something, and we'd lay that over on top of that coal oil and bake that and made our own marbles.
That's pretty ingenious.
Yeah, we was always coming up with something, Of course, we didn't know any different, and we certainly knew, of course, we didn't have a lot of money, but
made your own fun.
Yeah.
What was your brother's name?
Lonnie Joe.
Lonnie Joe.
Yeah, of course, I always called him Joe, and of course, they used to call me Ronnie. And I guess it was about 8, 9, somewhere in there, we started playing music. And I played steel guitar, and he played rhythm and lead guitar. And we started playing out. And I remember we'd get out in the yard, and we'd play. Everybody from the neighborhood would hear it, and they'd start coming up to the house, and they got to bring in their lawn chairs, and stuff. And then Mom finally took out her big old tables and started fixing lunch meat sandwiches, Kool-Aid and sweet tea and coffee and stuff. And well, the other ladies would then start making their covered dishes, and they would bring it up, and we'd all have a big meal. Lunch meat was bologna, though. Bologna and cheese.
Can't be beat.
I couldn't afford anything else with that. But everybody had a good time, and we started doing gospel music, and we got so acquainted, and to be around grown-ups that it made it easy, for us to communicate with. And we had we had some churches that, oh Lordy, what an experience. We ran into one that had these talkers that talked in tongue, and then we had the arm waving, and stuff, and the minister would get them all worked up, talking about how the lightning was going to strike them dead, and that the serpents were going to, kill them and bite them, kill them. And me and my brother were just sitting there shivering, and this lady cut loose, boy, and she started wailing in front of us, and when we got in the car before the minister finished closing the church down, we looked at each other and said, if he asks us if we would play for them again, let's don't do it. So that was the end of that. The holy rollers, we call them holy rollers. But that was probably the weirdest one we ever came up with. But then we did talent shows. I had a 3-neck steel guitar, and it was heavy, and I really had a time lifting it. But when we cut loose, boy, the crowds would just really, come alive.
Did you have a go-to song?
Well, I played a lot of Leon McCullough's songs with Bob Wills,
Okay.
Western tunes, and like Steel Guitar Rag, Panhandle Rag. There was another one that we loved to play, and that was In the Mood, which was an old Glenn Miller, tune.
Yeah.
That, and of course Elvis came on, and we started doing Teddy Bear, and but we did Bob Wills. We actually went from doing the religious to Bob Wills, and that's of course where I got into Leon McCullough. And then when Elvis came on, then it was all rock and roll.
Blue suede shoes.
Yeah.
Nothing but a hound dog.
And we played, well, of course I can't play anymore because I have nerve damage in my right hand, but my brother still plays today. And they've had some good bands that they've been playing together for quite a while. He was the one that had the talent, the ear, that he could just hear the melody of a song and could pick it out on the guitar.
That's special, isn't it?
Oh my! I envied him so bad. I was so jealous of him, but I knew that it was going to open up some avenues for us, which it did. We did a talent show in Coffeyville Civic Center, and the MC was Lee Woodward and Lionel. I don't know if you've ever remembered those, but they were on Channel 6, and Lionel was a puppet that Lee Woodward used in doing the weather and stuff. Kind of like what Woods did with Gus, with the sketches. And anyway, he took a liking to me and my brother, and he asked us if we would play for him on his TV show, and that was our first exposure then to television. And we thought we was in tall cotton when we got to be on television. But we went on, and of course I had a garage band when I was in college, and we did all the college stuff, high school. It was kind of funny about our college. We played for the high schools, and I'll never forget one night we was doing this show, and we were fixing to take a break, and all the girls started coming to the stage. Well, they wanted our autograph. We didn't have anything, I mean, legible, to sign, or anything. So they give us a piece of paper, whatever. And I'll never forget. In fact, we met not too long ago. My bass guitar player, I hadn't seen him in over 50 years, and my drummer had kept in touch with him, and he called him and told him, about my sickness. He came from Oklahoma City. We got together, and it was just like turning the page on a book. It was unbelievable. But I asked him. I said, Augie, I want to know something. I said, that little old gal that came up and you gave her an autograph. I said, I saw what you wrote on there. What caused you to say tank? He said, I don't know. I just had to come up with something to throw out there, so I just wrote the word tank. But we did some partying while we was at it too, in college with the band. And
Where did you go to college?
Well, my first 2 years I went over to Miami, Northeastern A&M, and then I switched and then went to Stillwater.
Oh, you're an OSU.
Yeah,
okay.
And I worked while I was going to college because my folks couldn't afford to send me, and I worked for the first Shakey's that had opened in Oklahoma.
Pizza. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Was it pizza? Yeah.
Shakey's Pizza. That's where they had the guy that played the piano, and a lot of times it was German songs, and stuff. And they had these big, I call them picnic tables with big old benches, and stuff. And boy, everybody get about 3 sheets in the wind, and of course, like I said, I was a pizza maker, and you talk about a hot job.
Was that in Stillwater? Or
yeah, I was in Stillwater.
In Stillwater, whereabouts?
Well, it later became Ken's.
Ken's.
It was out, would have been west of downtown.
Okay.
I remember there was like an old Homeland or Foodland or grocery there that was off the, what I call the main street of where all the little clubs were and eateries, that all the college went to, like college did.
Yeah. And
it was out there, it was probably about a couple of miles.
Okay.
And it was a lot of fun.
So what year did you graduate from OSU?
Let's see, 68 or 69, somewhere in there.
Vietnam War was.
So I went, yeah. It was, we were having a lot of friends then, inducted, and I went through my last year and graduated, and I was going to go to get some more education, my master's, and I didn't have the money, and I didn't want to take out any loans, so I came home and went to work, started saving my money. I thought, I'll go back. Never did.
Life happens.
Yeah, a lot of that happened. But then later on in life, I had worked for a loan company, and I decided I was going to try to go back to college. I was thinking I might want to be a teacher. So I went down to Tahlequah, and when I went into financial aid, fill out all the paperwork and everything. This guy was in his late 50s, and he said, why have you decided to go, come back to college? I said, well, I just don't think I'm going to, be able to make the kind of money that I'm going to have, if I decide I'm going to raise a family. And so he said, well, I want to tell you that I just 2 years ago decided to go back to college, and it is hard. It's hard. And he said, I think you really need to think about it before you really commit, because you're going to have to sacrifice, a lot of things. But luckily, I wasn't married then, so, I didn't have that to worry about. But like I said, I got back, I got to thinking about what he said, and I just said, nah, I'm not going to do it. In fact, what was really kind of funny was I walked out of there onto the campus, and the kids were dressing all kinds of goofy ways, and their hair was, it wasn't a good old clean cut, it was everywhere. And
in the 70s.
Yeah. And I just said, no, I'm an old man. So I didn't go back. But,
what was your degree in?
It was business management.
Business.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so what kind of career did you?
Well, the funny thing about that is that I went to the Oklahoma Unemployment Office here, and they had a testing, occupational testing deal that they did, and they asked me if I'd be interested, and I said, well, sure, I'd like to find out what my strengths and weaknesses are.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the counselor then came back and said, have you thought about financial?
Mm.
And I said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, a savings and loan, a bank, a loan company, whatever, And I didn't think much about it, and I went in a couple of years later. I was working for a Tasco at that time, Oklahoma Tire and Supply. That's an old name. And then when I realized that I didn't want to be in sales and work those kind of hours, I had a chance to go and interview. And when I did, I got the job immediately. And it started from there on. I spent 34 years with the banking industry.
Banking, okay.
And but I was in lending. I was in the S&L business for 5 years, but I was in the financial business or finance companies for like 13.
Your grandfather would be proud.
Yeah.
His ledger.
Yeah, everybody asked me, said, well, what'd you do? Or what'd you do for a lesson? I said, well, I was a crusty old banker and a Santa Claus.
But you didn't deal in buttons and washers this time.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Okay, then, so since you
I
mentioned...
kept thinking maybe one day I'd have some little child, that would come up, and say, I'd ask him, what do you want for Christmas? And I was kind of hoping I'd hear one say buttons and washers, But one little old boy though, I thought was really funny was I asked him what he wanted, and he came up and he said, Santa, I want a box turtle. A box turtle? I said, I've never had anybody ask for a box turtle. And I said, I know a lady here in Bartlesville that has a collection of box turtles. Would her name happen to be? And his eyes got that big around. He said, that's my grandma. And I said, I've seen those turtles. Your story is true. And what was so funny was Shirley, was her name, she made the best cinnamon rolls. I had a cousin over in Owater that wanted to have a bunch of her cinnamon rolls. And so one morning I went over and picked up 2 trays. And while we was in there having a cup of coffee in the kitchen, I started hearing this scratching. And I said, Shirley, I said, have you got mice? She said, no. She said, but I want you to, I got something to show you. We walked to the front door. There was 3 little box turtles in front of her door scratching the storm door, one in.
One in.
When they came in, they walked single file down that hall into the kitchen, and she had the television on, and the show Price is Right was coming on, and they lined up, and they were sitting there waiting for her to come so that they all could. Now I'm not pulling your leg. This is gospel. And I said, yeah, I know your grandma real well.
Bob Barker's voice was something they liked.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know what the attraction was. I guess it was just kind of maybe the noise, yeah. People getting excited, that they were being called, to come down and play.
Well, so how did you get into Santa, since you mentioned?
Well, I had clowned for 18 years with the Shriners. I became a Mason, and I had a friend of mine that I had went to high school with. Him and I were the big class cut-ups.
I can see that.
And he was known as Boo Boo around here.
Okay.
And my clown name was Corky.
Okay.
And we teamed up, and what was the strangest thing was we moved on the same street. I had not been in touch with him in several years. He had been in the war, and married, kids, everything. We moved across the street from him, and he come out one day all dressed up. And I said, where you headed? He said, well, I'm heading to a parade over in Cleveland. I said, oh, really? I said, I think that's something I'd like to do, with the kids and stuff. So he said to me, he said, I'd like to take you, but you're going to have to become a Shriner. And I said, well, I'm working on my degree work. That's just what I'll do. And so when I got all my degree work, he helped me get into the shrine. And oh boy, did they mistreat me. There was some funny stuff that happened. But when I got into the shrine, then I was able to travel with him, and I don't know how many circuses we did. We did stuff for March of Dimes, Special Olympics, muscular dystrophy. We couldn't say no. Because it was for the kids.
For the kids, and a little bit of fun.
Then of course we did the circuses, for the shrine. And whenever we do a parade, he and I would go to the town nursing home, and we would entertain them. And we had little songs, that we would do. And there was one called "Brush Your Teeth," and the people would just die laughing, even though they didn't have all the right mind, they saw us, with these huge. We handmade these toothbrushes, and we would get out there and go to scrubbing like this, and sing a song, and they'd just crack them up, And, but we'd come up, we did all kinds of skits and entertained a lot down at the kiddie park.
Mm.
We helped them raise some money to buy a ride down there called the Red Baron, which is their little biplanes, is what they are.
Okay.
And they look like what old Snoopy used to fly in.
Uh-huh.
That's what these look like. And I think it was right at about $66,000 is what that ride cost.
Oh.
And we raised half of it, and we had a foundation that promised that they would meet the other half if we, collect the money for the other part. So we did, and we spent a lot of hot summers down there.
Well, we should probably say what kiddie park is for those who might not know.
The kiddie park has been here since 1947.
47.
Yeah, and originally it was built near the dairy that I was telling you about where my dad worked, and it was called Pig Pen then. And they had a wading pool. It's what started it. And it later became a boat ride. They had little boats that would go around in a circle, And then they made a lot of the rides themselves, And in 1953, Mr. Artuno, who owned Retta Pump, called on the city and said, our company's growing. We need that piece of ground to enlarge our plant. So the city ended up coming up with the land there by the Caney River, and that's where we opened up the park. And it actually was built for children that were below the age of 12.
Okay.
And they did not allow teenagers to come because they had a lot of trouble with the older kids pushing the little ones around.
Mm-hmm.
But I understand that when I retired, they went through a period there where they had a lot of trouble, and they finally was able to get a foundation that come up with a pretty good size amount of money, and they bought a bunch of rides and enlarged it, and it's pretty nice now. They've got a big Ferris wheel and a big roller coaster.
Wow.
There's several rides on it.
Still for 12 and under?
Yes.
Still for 12 and under.
Well, I take that back. I think they started letting some teenagers because the state of Oklahoma changed some laws on the amusement parks where you couldn't allow kids under 16 to operate the rides. We had done that for years and had no accidents, no trouble. But we gave the 14-year-olds and 15-year-olds jobs their first experience.
Mhm.
The trouble with a 16-year-old was primarily they didn't want to work. And on top of that, they could take a lawnmower and go out and make make in one day more money than what they'd make all week at the kitty park.
Oh.
But apparently they did find some that they was able to get them to go to work down there. The 14, 15-year-olds, they pretty well ran the concession.
Well, that's good learning
Oh yeah, oh
opportunities
gosh,
for them.
yeah, yeah. Changing the money, and I mean just dealing with the public. I felt sorry for some of the kids though, because there was parents that would abuse them bad, mainly because they didn't like what they'd gotten served. They'd say, well, I told you to give me this and give me that, and you must not have heard me, because you didn't get the order right. Then they just throw it back in the window. And so there you go. You're teaching kids bad things.
Bad things.
And parents would get into cuss fights over silly stuff. We had to break up a lot of them, and then kick them out.
So were you involved with it? I mean, were you?
Oh yeah.
On a board of directors
Oh
or
yeah,
something?
I was president.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
you got to hear all the major
Oh
problems.
boy, you ain't kidding. I told a bunch of them to get out.
Mm.
Yeah.
So how many rides might there be?
Well, at the time I left, there was 14,
Mm.
and now I think it's pretty close to about 20.
Okay.
Hey, but it's a wonderful park.
Does it
for
have a
kids.
carousel?
Yes.
That's the best.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
it's pretty old. We've had them horses painted out I don't know how many times with volunteer groups.
Mm.
The Art Association here in Bartlesville has painted them I don't know how many times.
It's a community thing.
Yeah.
Not too many towns
No.
have these.
That's exactly right.
I don't know of any other one in Oklahoma. I mean, Frontier City, you can't count that. That's on a different scale altogether.
Yeah. There is some.
Oh, Enid may have.
There is some organizations that may have some, in Oklahoma.
Okay.
But they're more expensive. I mean, when they did that article about the kiddie park, at that time the rides were 25 cents. And before that it was a dime.
Oh.
And over the years, like I said, it had to go up because operating expenses.
Insurance probably.
And insurance. Oh, terrible. But
do you have to pay admission to get in?
no.
So you
did
just
not
per
have to
ride.
do that. The writer that did the story, when she called me, she said, "Is this really true? You're only getting 25 cents a ride?" I said, "Yes." "How can you do that? How can you run that park that way?" I said, "It's our town. This is well thought of, this town, this park." And I said, we when we need help, they're there, ready to pitch in. And I mean, we've had some flooding down there that's been unbelievable. Worst flood was in 1986, and it probably had 20 foot of water in it.
That's a lot of water.
Yeah, it was.
That's a lot of water.
It was, and all the cleanup
Mm.
was terrible. I wasn't a member then, but I helped out. And, but then we had, like I said, 2 or 3 other floods that I was, and it was nasty,
Mhm.
nasty. So
So,
we had organizations like Salvation Army, Red Cross, like I said, other organizations that came down and would bring us cleaning kits. The one thing that really kind of surprised me though was Red Cross. They would come with bottled water and a package of chips. That's all. No hands on deck. Salvation Army gave us 3 square meals, gave us all kinds of cleaning supplies, and some of the members, of course, helped.
their missions are a little different, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. I really thought that Red Cross was a lot more giving, and just, simple things. That I remember I had an uncle that was in World War II, and they'd entered some town in Germany, and when they did, Red Cross was there, and he told me, he said, I'll never donate a dime to the Red Cross. And I said, well, why? He said, that they used to have 3 cigarettes in a little package, and some of the organizations would just give them away. They charged us GIs money for those cigarettes. And they didn't care. I mean, it was supposedly a money maker, for them. So he was really disappointed about that.
Left an impression.
Yeah.
So you would be Corky the Clown for a kiddie park?
Yeah. And
Just to
shrine.
entertain the kids, or
Do what?
just to entertain the children?
Yeah. Well, but that wasn't the only thing I did. I was a sponsor.
Okay.
And I had over the years 35 kids that I helped go to our Shriners hospitals, and I got some tales there. But when the government started talking about health care, I really got upset because I had to call on families that their jobs didn't provide any coverage, and their children were either bow-legged or they had scars from fires. One little boy had a hunchback, and one girl had lost her leg. Another girl had like 70% of her body had caught on fire, and it burned her that bad. But the kids were so resilient. They didn't think there was anything different, about them. So it was, it was something that really amazed me as to the inner strength that you can have, especially a child. They can have some of the worst things in the world, and yet they don't know it. They don't think it. Then they'll surprise you. Loving, talk about grown up. Well, I mean, we had some that would give testimony as to what had happened to them. and about how the Shriners had helped. My wife, she never really thought much, about my Masonic work, and stuff. It was something that she just wasn't interested in. But we had an occasion where this fella out of Tulsa, Agdor, decided that he was going to take a bus load of the members to Shreveport. And when we got down there, we took a tour, and as soon as we walked through the front door, my wife looked at me and she said, "Now I understand why you're so committed." I said, "Yeah, honey." I said, you don't realize how important this is. We went into rooms there where they had clothes, all kinds of clothes. Had an arcade. The thing that really got me the most was they had a room where this guy made prosthesis, and he also made shoes. And, I never really thought about, that. And I thought, boy, how amazing, that really was. I mean, my one girl that I had, that she had lost her leg just right below the knee. And she was 13, and they provided her prosthesis until she was like 13. Normally 18 was where they would cut it off. But they helped her with forming new prosthesis up until 23. And she started having her own children. And I think she's got 3 little girls. When I was at the bank, she would bring those little girls and her, and they would come by and see me. Let me know how they were doing.
Warms your heart.
Oh, golly. I'll never forget the first time I saw her with her prosthesis. The parents had a birthday party for her at Skate World, which was a roller skating rink it used to be up north of Bartlesville, in between Bartlesville and Dewey. And again, like I said, they had this birthday party. Well, I'm sitting there talking to him, and all of a sudden, this girl comes skating right into me, bumps right into me. It was her. Her name was Angela, and it was her, and she was roller skating. And then later on, I heard she was doing cheerleading, and she played baseball. And I just...
What an example for others.
Oh,
yeah.
It was just incredible. Incredible. Had three little pretty girls, though. The courage, it takes just that alone. And trying to deal with those kind of issues with children that don't have any health issues. You have to learn to adapt. And she did real well. Proud of her. Yeah. The little boy that I had was from Dewey. And he had a hunch in the middle of his back. And he wore these large t-shirts so that the kids couldn't tell. He was really conscious of it. And we took him in, and they put steel rods, in his back. And his mother called me later, and she said, I think his name was Andy. He said, when he got to stand up, he looked at me and he said, "I'm a lot taller now, Mama." Yeah. But he he became a manager of some kind of a chain store, and had, I think, a couple of kids. And every time he'd see me, he'd come give me a hug, you know. So, you know, if that's what the Lord says, be a servant.
Mm-hmm. So you've had an impact on lots of folks.
Yeah.
So how did you transition from clown to
I meant to tell you about
Santa?
Yeah.
To Santa.
I had showed up several times, of course, at the bank, you know, at Halloween, you know, in different costumes, and I believe the last one I was a hobo. And this lady was over marketing, and she said, we need a new Santa Claus. Our old one has passed away. And I said, well, you know, I don't have a costume. She said, well, we do, you know. And I said, well, I'll try it. And they brought it, and of course, it had been worn so many times, had holes in it, you know, all kinds of stuff. The wig and the beard was all tangled up, and I had a beauty operator that went to work on it and did a beautiful job. And I wore that for about 3 years. And talk about divine intervention. I was at church one day, and something just came over me that I needed to pray. And I went into the chapel, and I said, Lord, if I'm going to continue to do this, you're going to have to help me grow a white beard. So right after there, I started letting it grow, and it kept getting whiter and whiter. But I still had a little bit of black, you know, in it. And I was talking to one of my theatrical friends about different kinds of dyes, you know, and stuff. And he said, well, you know, they make a spray on white. And I said, oh, they do. And I said, but what's it like to, you know, take it off? In other words, you know, I got to be able to take it off. And he said, you're going to like this. That it's hairspray and baby powder. And said, you just spray it around, and then, of course, brush, and it sets up. And when you get through and you start cleaning up, you wash it, and it comes out.
I have not heard that.
And so I think I went and bought about 3 or 4 cans. I went down to Tulsa, I'll never forget it. And went down to Tulsa and went to this, it was a beauty supply company.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, you wouldn't happen to have any of that spray on white? Oh yeah, we got that. You bet. So how many cans you want? So I told them, you know, and they brought it out, you know, and they said, are you going to use this for Santa Claus? And I said, yeah. And he said, well, it's perfect for that. So that's what got me started. And
was your hair already white? Or did you wear the wig? I guess you wore the wig.
Well, you know what? The way the hat was made and with the fur and everything, you couldn't tell that. I mean, my hair, because it was so fluffy, you know, if you look at that magazine, it's pretty fluffy.
So you're just concerned about your beard?
Yeah, with the beard.
So do you remember when you put it on for the very first time, how it made you
Oh man,
made you feel?
I was hooked.
You were hooked from day one?
Oh my gosh, yeah. Uh, well, there was I read this book that a guy had written called The Red Suits, and it was about his experience and how he was in Vietnam, and how he started working for a medical equipment company, and he started working on wheelchairs, and it became a mission for him. And his church people would come to him, and he would fix their children's wheelchairs, and then it grew from there. And in this book, I think he had 19 people working for him. And he was Santa Claus, he and his wife were Santa Claus for Stone Mountain in, I think, Atlanta, maybe, something like that.
Georgia, yeah.
Yeah. He didn't know it, but his book really kind of inspired me more, because it was hard to take it. I mean, take the suit off, because you get into it, and of course everybody, all my friends, they get me all kinds of Santa Claus stuff. I don't know how many dancing mechanical Santa Clauses I've got.
You got a collection, huh?
Oh man, I mean, tell you, it's funny how they come up with just about every one of the Christmas songs,
Oh, yeah.
and have Santa Claus do a little jig.
Well, that first year you were just doing it for the bank,
Yeah,
and then did that blossomed
yeah.
to other
Blossomed from
gigs,
there,
for lack of a better
and
word?
I was Santa Claus for them up until oh golly, it was probably 2015, something like that.
A long time.
Anyway, what they got me to doing though was the schools up in Dewey had little ones that they wanted to be able to let them see Santa Claus. And I was seeing them anywhere from pre-K up to the second grade.
Ah.
And that meant that I was seeing about 300 kids in one day. And they would come bus to the bank. There was a couple years that we did it at the school, but it was more exciting when it was at the bank, because they decorated, and had everything, really spruced up and stuff. And
Had a
in
special
fact, my
seat.
last one last year, up there last year was my, I guess you'd say it's probably my final, but it's one of the lady teachers said to her class, he said, "Now, boys and girls, I want you to know that Santa has seen your mom and dad when they were your age." And I looked at her and I said, "Oh, I wish you hadn't have said that." I said, "Because, boy, I'm old, ain't I?" But I really enjoyed it. Then I got hooked up with the San Francisco Children's Hospital, and was their Santa for probably 15, 16 years. And the same thing with James Phillips Hospital. I've had several people that said to me, "Have you ever been to Mall Center?" And I said, "No, and I won't be." They said, "Well, why do you say that?" I said, "That's a job." I said, "I'm doing this from the heart." I said, I don't want somebody telling me, you know, when I can go to the bathroom, when I can have lunch, how long I've got to sit there in this chair. I'm calling the shots, you know. And so they liked my answer. They said, we can see now why.
So you didn't charge?
I did not for a long time. And then I started having more and more being asked to come out and do Little Rock, the Mercantile, oh gosh, 2 or 3 other places in Tulsa that I did big shows for. And I did charge a little money. Of course, that helped me to keep my costumes and everything, you know, fresh.
And travel back and forth.
Yeah.
Did you have insurance? Did you?
You
had insurance.
Yeah.
That covered that too.
Yeah. In this day and time, you never know, you know, when you've got somebody that just
out to do.
Yeah.
So did your suit change over time?
It did. I had read about this costume designer in California, and she was a little Italian lady, about 5'2", 5'3", little, and she was dumpy, or lumpy, I should say lumpy, but the sweetest woman. And she sent me a catalog of the different costumes, you know, that she made. Well, she actually made the Coca-Cola Santa.
Okay.
Well, then she started making one that was called the Continental. And it was, well, you'll see it in the book.
Okay.
Right there. But I fell in love with them. They were very well made, but they were expensive. But I told myself, hey, if the Lord wants me to continue this, then I'm going to wear the best I can. And I'm just not going to, you know, buy one off the shelf. I want to get a professional made one. So I probably for about 4 or 5 years I wore the Coca-Cola Santa, but then this Continental, I kept looking at that Continental and I thought, boy, this is really, a nice suit. So I bought it, and I haven't changed with it. So I do have the old original that I started out with.
Okay.
But it just had a little old solid collar that went around your neck, and it was a zipper, and had, of course, the white front down here, and then you could wear a belt, of course, you know. But I wasn't really crazy about it. Of course, it didn't. I think ended up buying it, I think, and of course, I recommended it to him, but it was like $350, where my other ones were 3 times that.
Your Continental one?
Yeah.
Wow.
And the Coca-Cola. Yeah.
1,500 to 2,000.
About 1,000 to 1,200.
Okay, that's.
Now I could have made it a lot more than that.
It's an
because
investment.
they had a coat that had a hood, and you could add these others under it. But I said, you know, I don't need that. I want my hat to show up, you know, and I don't want no hood on my, you know, on my head. So I passed on it. I did. I bought some really nice boots, and a custom-made Santa belt.
From where? The
Well,
belt. The belt.
I found a company on the internet. It was an individual, a man that made them, and he made the buckles, and they were Rudolph.
Ah.
It was his face. It was his face, and he had a big red ruby in the center for his nose. And I said, I gotta have that.
Someone not in Oklahoma
Yeah, I know.
had to get
No,
it.
it was out on the West Coast. This lady was in Hollywood, California. She made other costumes besides the Santa Claus, but she had been doing the Christmas Santa Claus costumes for over 50 years.
Mm.
And the ones that you saw in like the Thanksgiving parade, most of those were hers.
Wow.
That she made. Last one that I saw that I fell in love with was Kurt Russell, and
The Christmas Chronicles.
yes,
Yes.
oh, that was gorgeous. Well, and then of course, hang on, all of a sudden I forgot his wife's name. Anyway,
Goldie Hawn.
yeah, Goldie. Oh, she had a beautiful, beautiful costume.
Mm-hmm.
But
Plus, he did Elvis in that movie.
yeah, but yeah, right. But when you've got a hobby,
Yeah. Did you consider
money
being,
doesn't make. I mean, it doesn't make any difference.
Do you consider being Santa a hobby?
Yeah, I do.
Do you?
Yeah, I do.
So each season, would you do anything in particular to gear up for it?
I didn't.
You just
Of course, my mother was a big lover of Christmas.
I was going to ask, did you have a Santa growing up?
And that one of the things before she got real bad sick and stuff was that she said, you go out into the world and you do the best you can and serve as many people as you can. I've got a fortune cookie that I kept. Me and a friend was at P.F. Chang's and we got a fortune cookie. And I opened it up and it had a phrase in there. It just caught me. And it said, you have the ability to reach many people. And I thought, that sticks.
Yeah.
So I've really enjoyed it. It's every season, brings along something, that you just don't anticipate, that'll happen. It can be a funny story or it can be a sad story. And I've had my share of sad ones. My time spent at the Children's Hospital, it's incredible. I was talking about it last night with a friend of ours. I said I held a preemie that was fit right in my hand. And I said, the old Lord has a purpose for this child. And I could not believe perfectly formed baby. You think, how in the world, can the Lord save, a child, that young to be able to grow? Now I can't say that there's not some health issues, but all in all, the Lord puts people out there that know how and they do their best to save them children. And I'm always amazed as the power, that the Lord provides. And all you have to do is ask.
But you have to listen too, though.
Yeah. I've had times, and I always call them divine intervention, but it's just like when I was down at the Kid Park. We had the flooding and stuff, and we were so tired, and it smelled bad, and I would be sitting there and having a little private moment and saying prayers, and I would go to talking to him, and I could feel the pressure of his touch on my shoulder. Mm-hmm. And I said, you're listening to me, aren't you? And so along about 15, 20 minutes later, now this is honest truth, this man pulls up in a Cadillac at the front gate and comes walking into the park. And I recognized him. And I called him by name. And I said, "What are you doing here?" He said, "I'm here to tell you something. Whatever it takes to get this park up and operating again, you keep all your bills and your receipts, and I will write you a check to pay for all of it." And when he left, there you go, did it again. Like I said, you ask, you receive. Yeah, I've had, like I said, I've had a good life. I've had wonderful parents. I feel so fortunate. My mother was a very giving person. When we lived out there in Pruneville, we lived right by the railroad tracks, and in the 50s, early 50s, the box cars would come by, and they'd be lined with men riding on the top of the train. Mm-hmm. And they'd be coming through our house to the smelters and then on into the main track to take them up north. And some of them would get off the train and would come up to our house and knock on the door, and Mom would go to see who it was. And there they was, all dirty and tattered, and just, you could tell, that they were having hard times. And they'd ask for a meal. Mm-hmm. And Mom would go in the kitchen, and she would take peanut butter and jelly, and if that's all she had, she would make that, and then if she had any pudding or cookies or whatever, she threw that in a sack and would hand them to them, and they'd just be so appreciative. Is there anything we can do? Can we do some work around the house? No, it's not necessary. And they would go on their merry way, and maybe never knew whatever happened to them. But most of them were all looking for work, because they were trying to, make a living, to get their family. My granddad was that way too. During the Depression, there was a lot of men that had to leave their families, and they would go to find work. And they would come to Granddad and would ask him if he would help, you know. And I don't know how many families Grandpa kept fed during the Depression, but when it was over and the country was beginning to prosper, they would come back to Granddad and say, John, we're here to pay our bill. And Granddad would say, you don't owe me anything. And they would tell him, no, you saved our family. We owe you. Well, he never got what he really, had out on the books. But he was, come up with some kind of a figure. Not anywhere as to what, it probably should have been. But it made him feel good.
And it made them feel good that they thought they were paying something.
Yeah.
You come from a family of big hearts.
Yes, that is true. I didn't realize just how that and how much that meant until I got older, and I saw what many of them, done through their lives. And I had an aunt that she worked for a donut shop here, and biggest part of the time, people would be homeless. She'd buy a sack of donut, give to them, send them on their way. Just little things.
Little things.
Yeah. So.
Well, what is it, do you think, that pulls people to Santa? I mean, why is he so special to so many people, do you think?
I think they realize that he is the main symbol of making people or reminding people what the importance of Christmas is. It's a celebration of the birth of Christ. And I would say that the gift giving, of course, comes from the history of Jesus being born. And so all these presents, everything, is kind of giving you a sense of what that must have been like back when he was born. So, Jesus was not a man that didn't listen to what people felt or had to say. And whenever they asked him for help, he always found a way. And I think we still need that a lot today. And we do. I mean, we've got, just in our own town here in Bartlesville, it's incredible the number of nonprofit organizations we have. Very giving. I'm just always fascinated when I'd be asked to come to say the volunteer meetings, and all the organizations would be invited, and they would come, and they'd fill up 2 rooms this size of people that would come, and be over 50. And a lot of them said, this is only half. I said, you ought to see all the different ones that we've got here in this town. It's incredible. And our churches are really, I mean, they do a lot of fine work too. Boy, the food, I mean, it's incredible. I mean, how, and our homeless, we've got a couple of organizations here in Bartlesville that reach out to the homeless all the time, and they'll provide, a place for them to stay when the winter gets bad. And it does make you wonder how in the world the people can survive when they have weather conditions that
are not good for humans.
You can be exposed to and die. When we see this deal with our immigrants, when they're coming into the country and they're carrying a gallon of water, it gives you a sense of just how rough it must be. And how long did they go without a meal? Yeah. Now, I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. It's just that our government cannot control it. There's no way. We were talking about this morning. Corporations feed that. They got to have that labor to operate their companies. And that goes back, a long way back. Even myself, I can remember the 60s when I worked for a foundry that made the cluster bombs. And they had a foundry across the street from where our machine shop was. And they would get a phone call from the federal agency saying that they were going to be coming and doing a bust because they had heard that the company was letting illegals work. Do you know that company would load them up and bus them back again across the border and hold them there until that federal government would get out of the way and they were back to work. And I saw the same thing with the chicken factories over in Arkansas. Well, it's incredible. They had Locust Grove, that is a town there that's right across the border from. There's a big poultry deal there in Decatur. I think at that time it was called Peters, but about 70% of the workforce were illegals. And they would bus them to Locust Grove, and they would stay off of the job until the agencies left, and then they would start busing them back over to work.
Work around the system.
Yeah. And them orchards out there in California, same thing in El Paso. We was on a mission trip down there. This was in the 90s. And I took my daughter because I wanted my daughter to see what it was like. Poverty, and then just how, not everybody was bad. And when we got down there, there must have been 20, 30 Hispanic kids at the orphanage. That was our mission. And they were out on their playground, which was an old dirt sod playground, with the only thing they had was a soccer ball. And every one of them kids participated, even the little bitty ones. And I told my daughter then, I said, you see the correlation here? Back home here, you've got more than enough soccer balls to go on for a long time, where the only one they've got is this one here. And in our cafeteria, the food, some of that food had come from different organizations. I'll never forget, we took quite a bit of our own food, and about 3 or 4 days after we had consumed all of it, we had to raid their pantry, and the only thing they had was corned beef. I never thought I'd ever get to where I hated corned beef. We tried to make every kind of casserole or whatever, whatever worked, Yeah. We would try to, make something out of it, and it was so salty but again, you make do with what you have. Another thing that really surprised me about that too was that when the director came up here to our church, she had a wish list. And on that wish list, she had a call for 100 5-gallon plastic buckets. And I looked at her and I said, Dolores, why do you need so many of these buckets? He said, Ron said they use them for everything. I said, well, what do you mean? He said they wash their clothes, they make their breads, they use the bathroom in it, haul water.
It makes sense when you.
And that brought back some memories on my grandparents' my mother's side. We used to walk 2 miles from my grandpa's house through a cornfield carrying buckets. And he had a windmill that would pump the well water up. And we would fill those buckets of water and take them back to the house. And we might have half of it left, And that's what our grandpa would boil the water and we would take our sponge baths. And it was an old galvanized tub, it had that leaning.
Yep.
And you tell people that now, and they, oh, you're pulling my leg. You didn't take a bath. And I said, yeah. I'm sorry to tell you, but yeah, we sure did.
And everybody was doing it the same way, I guess. Yeah.
And an outhouse. Oh my God. I remember wading through snow, just to go to the bathroom. I'll never forget. First time we were staying with my grandpa, we'd have to go urinate, and he had an outhouse with a pretty good ways from his home, and we'd have to walk through the middle of the night to where it was at, and there was no light. I mean, they didn't have any electricity. It was gas, but you didn't have any yard light or nothing. I mean, you just walked through pitch black. And he finally said to us boys, said, I want you to come with me, you boys, and I want to show you something. We went out there on his porch, and he said, now, he said, you guys can use this off of, you can use your, or do your business off of the porch. And we looked at one another and they go, what? Yeah. Mama, of course, Mom had the old slush pot, which is called slush pot or custard oil. Oh God, that was a different style. It's kind of funny, you know, to look back and think about those things and how, you know, our nation has progressed so much, and that's what I like so much with volunteering up at the Dewey Hotel History Museum. There's a lot of items like that that bring back. They got some beautiful old stoves up there, and I'll never forget the first time I went up. I walked in and went into the dining room, and then went in and I started going into the kitchen. And just before I did, I looked at this friend of mine and I said, "Can you smell that?" And he going around, you know, he's whiffing. And he said, "No." I said, "That's my grandma's yeast rolls cooking in there." That brought back a lot of memories. Homemade pies. Oh my God. It's so funny, you know, how they adapted so much, you know, with flour and you know, how they'd make the cherry pies and they would have the little thin strips about like an inch, you know, and lay across it into a checkerboard, you know, stuff. That was an art, really. And then trying to make the meringue for the pies. Oh, my dad was a master at that. As I told you, he was in the Merchant Marines. He was a cook. Never cooked a day in his life until he went into the Merchant Marines. And he came out, boy, and he was a master. He was a master. But my mom was a good old country girl, country cook. She'd make a meal. My grandmother, I'll never forget one time, she had two little grandsons that the dad had to leave them to find work. And they came down and they was hungry. And they were just walking. I mean, they weren't very big. And she went out and sent Dad, one of the kids out, and they picked some cucumbers and okra and what else? Oh, green onions. And she chopped all them up and put them in a pan and cooked them up, and then added them to scrambled eggs. And that's what the boys had to eat. But still today, the omelets like we buy,
Yep.
just like a flashback, you know, of those.
Well, what would she fix like for Christmas and Thanksgiving? What was the meal?
Boy, like Thanksgiving, sage dressing. And then she'd make that turkey gravy and sweet potatoes, carrots, peas. She'd either have ham or turkey. Christmas dinner was usually always ham, of course. But at Thanksgiving, the one thing that we always loved was her cranberry sauce. She handmade it and had a food grinder. And she would put the cranberries in and grind it up. And then she'd take and chop up the celery and then she might, have Dad pick up some mandarin oranges or cherries, and boy, and cherry jello, mixed with it, die for. But her yeast rose, that was the killer right there.
Did you learn how to make them?
No,
No.
I never did.
No.
My brother does, but I don't. Yeah.
What would you do, a Christmas tree?
Sometimes we would, depending on if we found one out in the woods, and we'd cut it, down. And, but then we got to where, of course, Dad was working a little bit more, and we was able then to buy, the trees. I'll never forget, when I was in high school, I was working for a drugstore here in Bartlesville, and it was called OOHRP, and they had found some Christmas tree company that was selling Christmas trees, so the owner decided to buy one. Well, it was scraggly looking, and I said to her, Maureen, I said, "Dude, we got to do something with this tree. It just don't have anything. I mean, no really life to it, color." So she said, "Well, I can see you have some ideas, don't you?" And I said, "Well, I do if my mother will help." And so we made chains of cranberry, and then popcorn, and then we had colored paper, that we'd make the rings out of, and I think the only store-bought thing we had was the bubble lights. And I decorated that tree that Christmas, and Maureen said, "You just got hired for every Christmas till you put these trees together." I said, "No, I just wanted to do it once." But God, I was making, I think it was like 50 or 60 cents an hour. And I was a delivery boy and a soda jerk.
Well, do you remember the first time you saw Santa? How young you might have been?
Oh, wow. Yeah, there was a little church at the base of out here called Circle Mountain, and that church had their own Santa Claus, and of course they had the fruit sacks and hard candy and stuff like that. That's really about all you would get, maybe a little small toy. But boy, we liked those sacks though, because you'd get an orange or an apple, and that's a big deal. Like I said, you tell kids that, and they can't even appreciate what you've experienced as a child.
Well, did the town have a Christmas parade when you were a child?
Sure.
When
Yeah,
you were little?
I don't remember that much about the parades when I was little, because we lived out in the country.
Okay, yeah.
And back then, the only time that you come to town was on a Saturday. And especially with our Grandpa Smith, because he lived in a little town called Osage, which was right across the river from Cleveland. And that's where the farm was that he had spent so many years sharecropping. But I started, gosh, it must have been about 3 or 4 years after I was doing the fake, and I think I'd just gotten into the wearing the regular beard. And I did some parades for Bartlesville. I'll never forget, there was this one that Willow Rock had brought this freight wagon in, and I rode in it, and it was being pulled by I think, I want to say it was a Welch workhorse. It was huge. Well, I bet his feet were that big around or better. Anyway, the guys that hauled me in that wagon, they must have weighed probably close to 300 apiece. Okay, they were big boys. When they got in that wagon, them springs just sunk to the bottom of the wagon, and they could just barely see, with the range, where they were going. And this wild boy said, "Now, Santa Claus, we want to warn you about something." I said, "What's that?" He said, "Well, you better be hanging on to this buggy seat." And I said, "Well, why?" He said, "Well, old Jake has a first step that he takes is a power surge, and he'll jump, when he goes to pull off." And said, "If you're not hanging on, he'll throw you off the back end of that wagon." So all through that parade, boy, I had that buckboard grip. I mean, it was pretty comical. But later on, I bought my own sleigh and had it mounted on a trailer, and did that several years.
Ah.
Yeah.
Do you still have it?
No, I ended up selling it to a friend of mine.
Who's also in the Santa business?
Yeah. When I'm not able to do one, I'll refer the ones that I've mentored, which is okay.
Yeah, that's part of
it.
Did you have a mentor yourself?
No.
Nope. You just learned. You taught yourself.
It's just like my clown. Hey, Boo Boo. I think he had some magazines that I looked at, but I wasn't real crazy about the look, So I just started experimenting with makeup, and of course, then I found out that to set it, you use baby powder, and it kept it from being shiny and running, and it worked real well. And it's just like, approaching kids and stuff in both clowning and Santa Claus. And really actually with dogs or pets and elderly. I had to be real careful with elderly. I would reach out to, shake hands with them. I wouldn't grip them. I'd lay their hand inside mine and just hold it just like that. And I never squeezed because I found out that it hurt. It hurt them, And the little kids, it was high five or knuckle.
Even as Santa?
Yeah.
Even as Santa?
Yeah.
Did you wear gloves?
Yes, I did.
Did you?
I did something different though. I didn't wear the white gloves. I always wore black, and I think that actually comes from the Coca-Cola Santa, because there you'll see some of the ads where most of the pictures show him with black gloves.
I'll have to pay attention. I haven't looked at that many.
Yeah, Now I had some that were green, and of course, I had the white. But so much of your costume is red and white, and so the problem with that was that the fur and the gloves were like they ran into one another, and where the black was contrasting with the green was different, and so people realized, there's a real hand there. Little tricks. I mean,
Did you wear the little glasses?
Yeah.
Did you?
Yeah. I think that one, like I said, there was one there that I had the glasses on.
Well, did you let your beard grow year round, or would you shave it off in the summer and start it?
Mostly, but I would take and have them trim it every once in a while, just to kind of shape it. And
but would you have to have your suits cleaned?
Oh yeah, after season's over, yeah, I go through quite a cleaning process.
There's a cleaners in town that you trust?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's one here that I've been going to for a long time.
Well, what if your outfit had to be mended, or
I've got some seamstress ladies that
will take care of you, huh?
Yeah, never charge me. They, you do such good work, and we're more than happy to help you.
Well, I imagine there's a lot of families in town that have you through the years.
Yeah, it when you just like this, you got 2 years of these little kids here. But I've got some that I've been going, probably 15, 20 years to their house. I'm just their Santa. And
so you've done some individual homes?
Yep.
Are you officially retired?
Well, I guess you'd have to say I am because of my illness that I had. And
so did you work last season?
Oh yeah.
2023?
Oh yeah. I had been going over to the mercantile, and that was a lot of fun.
In Pawhuska.
Yeah. The owner, I've known her ever since she was, pretty young age, and her folks used to belong to our church, and I knew her brother real well, and we got him to clown with us one time, and it was so funny. We talked him into being one of our donkeys in a duck tank down at the kiddie park in a fundraiser that we did, and had him all made up, and it was pretty cool. He fell in love with it, so he liked it. Well, he had an occasion that he wanted to go to the fire station because he knew that one of the guys had a fear of clowns. We took him over there and we snuck up into the room where all the recliners were and the lights were off. And we opened up the door and he went in and went to shaking the guy. And when he opened his eyes and he seen Mike, he like to tore that recliner out and went running out of the station. And the rest of the guys, the fire department guys, were dying laughing. Boy, he didn't like that at all, though.
Well, that'll get him on the naughty list.
Yeah.
Wanted.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So do you have a highlight or two of your time as Santa?
A highlight or two. Well, let's see, I don't know how many Miss Oklahomas have had it sit on my lap. Um, well, it's many people.
That's hard to answer, yes.
Yeah, it's
Well,
that's kind of hard.
Well, did the request for toys change much?
Uh,
A trend or change in that?
I had some last year that did really get me. I had a little 6-year-old that I had. I believe it was over at the Murphy Pack. But he came up and he asked me, or I asked him what he wanted. And he said, I want a gun, like my dad. And I looked at him and it really went all over me. And I said, you mean a play gun? He said, no, a real gun. I looked at him and I said, you're going to have to talk to your dad about that. This Santa Claus doesn't deliver weapons. And they were standing off and they heard what I said, and their whole demeanor of their faces really like they were mad at what I said. And that really took me by surprise. I didn't think they would act that way. And I don't really understand what was going through that little boy's mind unless the father was taking him out to the woods and practicing shooting and stuff that was a wrong thing to do. I had a lot of the those. Can't believe I went blank here. Little things that you clip together and.
Legos?
Yes. Oh my gosh. You talk about every time I turned around, it was Lego this, Lego that. And, oh my gosh. I didn't realize I had that many different ones of them that you could make.
It's amazing, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the prices keep going up.
Oh boy, ain't that true? My daughter, she's got one. She's never put it together. Still in the box. Yellow Submarine. Yeah. Which, of course, that was one of my favorite songs.
The Beatles or the Monkees? Beatles.
It was Beatles.
Beatles.
We played it on our sound system down at Kitty Park a lot. Yeah.
Well, do you have a favorite Christmas tune?
I have a favorite Christmas tune.
Not Rudolph, since your belt was Rudolph?
No.
I think of Oh Holy Night.
That's exactly what I was thinking of was Oh Holy Night.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. There for a while, of course, you have all these, things that people, naturally sing, but the gospels seem to be the ones that you don't hear very much of. Silent Night, beautiful, beautiful song. There's a lot of them like that. Little town of Bethlehem. I ended up joining a choral group here in town, And since I couldn't play my instrument anymore, I joined the choral group, and we usually, about October, we start working on our Christmas songs.
Mhm.
Oh boy, that, doing the old Christmas songs is my favorite.
Well, that gets you in the mood for the season for sure, doesn't
Oh yeah,
it? Doesn't it?
oh yeah, yeah.
Christmas cantatas.
Huh?
Christmas cantatas.
Yeah,
Some of the churches have those Christmas
Yeah.
cantatas.
yeah.
Any Christmas, any gift that you wanted as a child that Santa did not deliver on?
No, but I will tell you one that was probably pretty comical though, that my brother and I wished for, and snuck around and figured it out. We were both wanting bicycles.
Mm.
Well, in our little house, we had a hall closet, and it was two with, like two closets together. It was long, big, and Dad went out to an old sporting goods store here in town and bought our bicycles, and he hid them in that closet. And of course, they put covers on them, and stuff. Well, we happened to find them, and so we wanted to see what Santa Claus looked like. And we crawled in there. We waited until they went to sleep, and we crawled in there and had them covers over us. And Dad went to pulling them out, and we came out of there. And he really got on us, but we never really did, accuse him of being Santa Claus, but that was a pretty funny moment then.
You've had lots of those, it sounds like.
Oh golly, yeah.
We probably need to wrap it up.
Yeah.
They've been chewing us out. So 2 questions. What did you go by, Santa Claus, or did you have another name you went by?
I started out. I didn't want to be Santa Ron or Santa Claus, and I don't know what made me do it, but I came up with Oklahoma's Jolly Old Soul, and I created my Facebook around that.
Okay.
And then for a long time, it was on the internet, and the owner of Eskimo Joe had a contest of wanting people to take pictures of them being in the Christmas sweatshirts. So my daughter and I were over in Eureka Springs, and we were having lunch at a place called Sparky's that they were noted for their good hamburgers. And I had this old pipe that I had found at a antique store. It had a really neat Santa look to it, bold to it. And I was holding on to it, and my daughter, and of course had a Santa poster, and she took a picture of me. And I had it for about, probably a couple of years. And when I seen that ad, I thought, I know the owner, Stan. I said, I think he'd like to see this. So I went ahead and mailed it to him. And unbeknownst to me, he ended up having it put out on the internet. I didn't win the contest, but he put it out on his website, then on top of that. And so I really got a big kick out of it, the fact that he actually put it on the internet, because I really didn't expect that. But a friend of mine called me and said, "Did you know you're on the internet?" And I said, "What do you mean?" And, "Oklahoma Jolly Old Soul." "Oh, you're kidding." "No, you're there." I pulled it up, and sure enough. So that was my claim to fame.
There you go.
Yeah. But I really enjoyed getting to know Stan. He's really a super guy. My sister-in-law, at one time, she worked for the Chamber of Commerce for Stillwater. And she had to do a lot of events with him. And they got to be close friends. And when she heard, that she called him and said, "That's my brother-in-law, too." So he come to Bartlesville, then later did some kind of a talk or something. They invited him to be one of the guest speakers for the chamber. And he came, and I went up and said hi to him. And he said, "Well, hello, Santa Claus." He said, "Boy, I tell you what," he said, "I sure like that photo you had of being on with our doggone sweatshirt." Oh, he really was a nice guy. In all honesty, I don't know if he's still alive.
He is.
Is he?
He is.
He's really a very interesting man.
Mm-hmm. I think one of my coworkers interviewed him a couple of months ago,
Exactly.
so that'll show up on our website at some point. So
Oh, wow.
I'll let you know when that happens.
Yeah.
So what has been Santa meant to you?
Well, my mama said that she wanted me to try to be the best servant. And that's what I've tried to do.
Yep.
And I'll give it a good run.
So when you enter the room with your ho, ho, ho?
Yeah.
Do you? And how do you leave?
Huh?
When it's time to wrap up and leave the site, what do you say when you're leaving as Santa?
I do. We wish you a Merry Christmas. I don't do all of it. I do. I wish you a Merry Christmas. I wish you a Merry Christmas. I wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. So long to all. That's it.
That's it. Do you sing it or just
No, I
say
sing it.
You sing it?
Yeah.
Will you sing it for us? Do the best you can? No, you don't.
Well,
you don't have
I'll
to.
try.
You'll try.
We wish you a Merry Christmas. We wish you a Merry Christmas. We wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Good night.
Excellent. You have been awesome, I think.
Well, thank you, Tanya.
You've brought lots of joy and kindness to a lot of this part of the world,
Yeah.
of Oklahoma.
Well, I hope so.
And you are a jolly, we won't say old, you
Yeah.
are a jolly soul.
Right.
Well, thank you for spending the morning with us.
Oh, thank you, Tanya. I enjoyed it.
It's been great.
Okay.